Alrighty then. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the January edition of Complete Crock. I'm your host, King Crockett. How's everybody doing today? Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, can we all hear me? Say something in the comments. All right, cool. All
This
right,
might
good
be
stuff.
very, very limited.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. We don't really have, a concrete topic today. Today's more about kind of just shooting the shit and picking up some recommendations in terms of like books and YouTube channels and stuff like that. Kind of the devolving idea for this stream was initially I was going to do kind of a presentation of meta analyses and kind of teach anyone who was interested in watching sort of how to read a meta analysis and how to interpret the results. And some stuff came up this month that kind of made uh, my my personal and work life a bit of a clusterfuck. So it was kind of not possible to prepare that presentation in the interim. So we'll probably have to delay that to next month's stream. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna this month we're just gonna do like shout outs. Like back in the day, I used to make videos. In between long absences between my own uploads, I would like put out videos. Subscribe to these channels, and they were like smaller YouTube channels that I thought were worthy of getting more attention. And some of them actually ended up, getting millions of subscribers ultimately. SEFD Science and Physics Girl in particular. Like when I shouted them out, they only had like a few thousand subscribers. Now they're in the millions. So, um, yeah, so that might happen to some of you. I take full credit, of course, for their for their success. That's all me. They owe me all their money. That's definitely my attitude.
I love it.
Yeah,
No hubris there, my friend. No
yeah.
hubris at all.
Not
So
even
I didn't want
slightly.
to,
I'll be
no,
billing
but
them.
of course you will. So I think before you get into meta-analysis and stuff like that, we should just throw out verbally what that is. So
Yeah, sure.
meta-analysis is a research process used to systematically synthesize or merge the findings of single independent studies using statistical methods to calculate an overall or absolute effect. Meta-analysis does not simply pull data from smaller studies to achieve a larger sample size, which I think is pretty damn important.
hmm Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself. Yeah, and meta analyses are kind of widely regarded as the gold standard of evidence. If you have a meta analysis that supports some proposition, then this is generally taken to mean that this is better than an individual study because you've actually pooled the effect sizes of a whole bunch of studies in order to account for random variation between studies. What's called between study heterogeneity. And while it's true that meta analyses, generally speaking, are the gold standard of evidence, this is a slight oversimplification because meta analyses are subject to all kinds of potential problems if you don't know what to look out for. So things like excessive heterogeneity, where you're essentially combining studies that don't really have anything to do with each other. Um, you're essentially comparing apples and oranges. You're taking two studies that only superficially resemble each other, and you combine their effect sizes, and you're basically comparing apples and oranges. You're putting apples and oranges together, and then you're acting as though you've counted up all the apples, even though you're also counting oranges, right? That happens. And there are ways of looking out for that and being able to say, okay, maybe we shouldn't take whatever this meta analysis says at face value, because it has extremely high between study heterogeneity. Um, and
Well, and that
sorry.
and entering into that as well as your p-values too, right? So they have to be comparable and comparative because if they're not, then you haven't discovered anything. You've just
Well,
combined again, you've just created a bigger sample size, right?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, like, I actually think that if you have all of the studies that were actually performed, and this kind of goes into publication bias, there are going to be some studies that don't get published because their p values don't meet whatever threshold people decide is the difference between science and non-science for entirely arbitrary and institutional reasons. Um, if you discount those studies, if you count basically small effect studies, um, you're going to end up with a non-representative sample of studies that are being meta-analyzed, and the result is going to be a skew in the purported effect size, and that can cause publication bias problems. I was gonna I was gonna get to that as well. Just touch on that very briefly. There are diagnostics available that you can perform, and that I will be going over to kind of help explain how we can go about assessing whether a meta-analysis has been afflicted by things like publication bias and p-hacking. There are actually tools you can use under certain circumstances that can let you determine whether p-hacking has taken place. To answer Mila Bitux, this person's asking: Are questions open only to subs and patrons? If you can leave a comment, go ahead and ask a question. You can like if you can type and I can see, then ask away. This
Right.
this this
I'll
this
I'll
yeah, this is
if
going to
there's
function as
something super important, I'll throw it at you, bud.
yeah. Thanks. Yeah, this will function as a Q&A as well. But anyway, back to what I was saying earlier. I was gonna make this stream into like a shout out stream where I would shout out channels that I think are kind of deserved. But as I thought about it a little more, I realized these streams, they don't get quite as many viewers, and I feel that some of the channels that I want to shout out, including one who I'm pretty sure is watching right now, I feel like I'd be doing them a disservice if I relegated the shout out to like a stream that most people are not going to watch through all the way, and it's just better to like make it its own separate video. I think that'll maximize the effect of like people gaining subscribers and then becoming YouTube stars with millions of subscribers, and then completely forgetting about me. I'm billing you, SEFD science and physics girl. Just kidding. I'm not actually bitter. I'm happy for their success.
Your friend Seek and Destroy would like to let you know what's up, Croc.
What's up? Oh, dudes in my butt. 49ers or Eagles? Um, I don't follow sports, so I can't say. But anyway, yeah, I ultimately decided this stream is going to be about like some, I'll just let you in on some of the books I've been reading lately. Maybe take recommendations for books, movies as well, um, stuff like that. Just kind of a cultural exchange of sorts, and people can like do Q&A in the meantime. This is going to be a very laid back kind of stream. I think maybe for a future stream, if not the next one, then certainly the one after, I might bring on guests like Colin Wright or James Lindsay or other YouTubers. I think Gary Edwards joined us for a naturalistic nuke stream. Yeah. So let's talk about books and movies. Alpha Dog, have you read any good books or watched any good movies lately? Anything you might consider recommending?
Encanto. My daughter had me
Encanto.
watch Encanto, so I had to learn about not talking about Bruno, and I had to ask what an abuela was. Apparently, it means grandmother. I didn't know. Now I know. That's what happens when you have an 8-year-old. Oh, and it's going to be Eagles by 4 because it's in their house.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So lately, I've been reading this book called The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. It's a really good book. I'm really enjoying it. It's basically talking about the psychology of people who tend to join mass movements, and why these things tend to become totalitarian in character. Hoffer's an interesting character himself. He actually wasn't formally an academic. He was like working in shipyards or something. I don't remember the exact details, but yeah, he was just a regular guy, and he wrote this book, and like I think it's still read, in certain departments to this day. I think like Berkeley named an award after him, and it was like President Eisenhower's favorite book for a while. Um, I haven't finished it yet. I'm still working through it. Like I said, I've got a lot of stuff going on right now, but yeah, I definitely recommend that book to anyone who's interested. Um, Not too long ago, I read a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. This one kind of deals with the history of psychedelics and the neuroscience behind it, and basically about how the default mode network, this series of neuronal connections inside of your brain, is kind of thought by some researchers to be where the ego is housed, where kind of like the first person experience of reality is contained, and how psychedelics can help us kind of understand consciousness. Because what they apparently do, at least the theory goes, is they downregulate the neurotransmitters being fired throughout the default mode network, and in so doing, produce a kind of um, ego death, a temporary ego death. This produces the psychedelic experience at a sufficiently high dose, where you're no longer experiencing the world from the first person point of view. So there's like if you were to take it, Alpha Dog, your experience is I'm not here. There is an entity here, and everything is connected. Those are kind of the broad strokes.
Right. So like a ayahuasca experience or psilocybin.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. Hmm.
so I was the last three books I read actually were Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, the Giza Power Plant by Christopher Dunn, and Forgotten Civilizations and Origins of the Sphinx by Robert Schoch. I watched Joe Rogan. He had on Bright Insight and Ben Van Kerkwyk from Uncharted X, and they went over a ton of that ancient Egypt stuff. And I think the big one was Robert Schoch was talking about the water erosion in the Sphinx enclosure, about how 4,500 to 5,000 years ago, uh, the Sahara was green, right?
Hmm.
And because of shifts in um, the ecology, it's just obviously now a desert. But the Nile River is still a growing concern. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's amazing stuff.
Hmm.
It so the pyramids are it's way less than 1 degree to true north. The size of the pyramid with its casing stones on at 43,200. Those like numbers that Graham or Randall Carlson was talking about. These special numbers and their ability to handle the amazing mathematics. And so in the King's Chamber, they have 70 and 80, 90 ton um, stones that were taken from Aswan, which is like 500 miles away.
Hmm.
And there are people that say, well, I know how they got them there. Really? You do? No, you don't. You absolutely don't, because you can't. Like whatever their technology was, whatever it was, the way they did what they did, we can't do it, or we haven't gotten to that point. Like, we can make some of the things that they made, but it would be so disgusting, just so difficult. So
Interesting. It seems Melia Bitux has a couple questions. Um, so they're asking, I was wondering whether there was a source for what you presented in the series of the nuke when you talk about the four pillars of scientific methodology, which corresponds to evolution, or is it your own framework? Because I found it particularly useful, so I was wondering where can I find some extended discussion, whoever wrote it. So the big four operational criteria are kind of I don't know that they come from any individual source. They come from like a plurality of sources. Like take optimal flexibility for example. Optimal flexibility is composed at least partially of falsifiability, and Karl Popper was kind of the principal champion behind that. But um, his conception of falsifiability was that this was the demarcating process between science and non-science. And while it's a necessary component, I'm not convinced that it's a sufficient one. Um, you can have examples of potentially falsifiable theories, which are nevertheless non-scientific. And moreover, his kind of general philosophy of science was that science proceeds through conjecture and refutation, which kind of centers falsifiability methodologically within the entire scientific enterprise. And that's not something I agree with necessarily. I take a different view of how science proceeds. But there are a whole bunch of philosophers. You know, I kind of mentioned them by name in the first nuking social constructionism video, and you can go check them out generally. But these four kind of like if you pick up any philosophy of science book, they're going to outline like a series of things that they say are characteristic of the scientific activity, and the big four I feel encapsulate all of them, but you might get like fewer or greater numbers depending on which book you're reading. Um, the question also says four pillars of scientific methodology, which corresponds to evolution. So there are two ways of interpreting this question, Amelia. Either you could be asking how the big four apply to evolutionary theory, or you're asking how evolution governed the evolution of our consciousness, or governed the evolution of cognition in a fashion that incentivized these four criteria as being kind of the center of our um, of our predictive modalities, our predictive cognitive modalities. Um, so the first one will be easier to answer on the spot. The second one will require a kind of complex evolutionary incentive based arguments. That were kind of inspired by some reading I did from the philosopher John Bickel. But for the first part, how the big four apply to evolutionary theory. I mean, take predictive accuracy and precision. You'll have the prediction of things like the locations of specific transitional fossils. Tiktaalik is probably the most famous example. They were like, okay, if evolution is true, then this type of organism with these specific features will be found in sedimentary layer of this exact sort. And they dug it up, and oh, look, here it is. Here is the thing that nobody has ever seen before, but which we predicted we're going to find here. There's a book by one of the people who discovered Tiktaalik. It's called Your Inner Fish. That's another book recommendation I'll throw out there. That kind of tells the story of how they came to suspect that based on evolutionary theory, this particular fossil will be found in this particular sediment, and then B, how they went ahead and the process by which they discovered it, and all of that good stuff. It's a pretty famous book. You'll find it probably at Barnes and Noble.
I
Or
was
you can.
watching Balkai Labs and Gutsick Gibbon discuss this process of human evolution and also Tiktaalik and the predictive power of the model for
Mhm.
evolution. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the predictive aspect of it. Then there's the explanatory component. So I guess you have to evaluate evolutionary theory holistically. Like, does it incorporate explanations that are superfluous to what's necessary, what's minimally necessary to make predictions? Like, are we shoehorning in anything which, if we remove from the theory, is going to leave the theory intact? Like, are we going to lose any predictive power if we take anything out of evolutionary theory? And if the answer is no, then the theory is maximally efficient, as far as anyone can tell. Then you have optimal flexibility. Well, are there circumstances under which evolution can be challenged? Of course, although it's been a long time. The theory has undergone modifications in order to account for what should we call it. Um, Developments in things like genetics. Alpha Dog, I'm gonna mute you just for a little bit because I'm picking up some background noise from you. Whenever you want to talk again, feel free to unmute yourself. But um, shit, what the fuck was I talking about? Very very good at being distracted. Yeah, it's optimally flexible. The theory is optimally flexible because it's responsive to new evidence, as evidenced by how evolution itself, the theory has evolved in response to the development of genetics. Uh, and B, it's also falsifiable. There are circumstances under which evolutionary theory can and would be replaced by a superior theory. Um, I think there was a famous exchange. This might be a little bit tongue in cheek, but it actually inspired Thunderfoot's bunny rabbit, whatchamacallit, profile picture. There was this evolutionary scientist who was asked what would falsify evolution, and he answered fossil bunnies in the Precambrian. Now, I don't know that that would actually independently falsify evolution, but I know that it would definitely raise some eyebrows and would be a major blow to the theory and would at least start motivating the development of alternative theories. But you know, there are no fossil bunnies in the Precambrian. Unless creationists come along and do some dishonest shit where they like literally, I don't know, take a fossil bunny and they like wedge it in there. Like I would not be surprised to discover they went to such lengths to given the kind of shit they pull. Um, let's see. I got a comment here saying The Philosophy of Human Evolution by Michael Roos has a good passage on how evolution shows what if everything is a delusion is BS, also its impact on epistemology. I'm very interested on the epistemology part because evolutionary epistemology was basically um, Willard Quine's idea. So Amelia Bithooks, if you wanna get something like really close um, to the principal inspiration to what I developed with the naturalist nuke, check out Quine's Epistemology Naturalized. That's the name of his essay, Epistemology Naturalized, and he kind of derives his naturalized epistemology from psychology, whereas mine is derived more from evolution, or perhaps more specifically, the evolution of cognition. Alpha Dog, in case you didn't catch it the first time, I muted you prior because of some background noise.
Absolutely. Yeah,
All
there
right,
was people moving around behind me and opening doors and things like that. So I
no
had to be like,
worries.
"Hey, I'm on with King Crocodile, man. That's my bro. You got to be cool, okay? Like, don't interrupt my time with the man. I want to be famous one day like him."
Oh yeah, so famous, so famous with all
You know
however
what?
50 people watching. Yeah, I love all of you who are watching. By the way, you're cooler than the remaining 93,950 who probably forgot they're subscribed to me.
I think part of the problem is that you were very serious in delivery, and sometimes people are taken aback. Like you're like, this, the thing you're saying isn't true. Here's all the reasons why it's untrue. Here's all my slide decks that indicate that you're saying things that are not necessarily optimal or even well thought out. And whoo, some people get their feelings hurt by you. I don't know if you know this. I enjoy nothing more, generally speaking, on the interweb nets when I go to YouTube and watch you crush idiots. It makes me feel good that there are smart people out there that can do that. But then they keep saying the same shit, right? You're like, everything you just said is a lie. King Crocoduck, you're not being nice. It doesn't matter if you're being nice. All the things you said are crap. And then you continue to say these things. You do the same thing that like Dave Farina does to the flat earthers, which makes me also giggle.
Yeah, yeah. I do hope maybe moving forward though I can become better known for ideas that I kind of I want to act, I guess, more in a creative than a destructive capacity. You know, not that I don't enjoy like recently I had a debate with Dave McQueen. He's a young Earth creationist, and Goodsick Gibbon did a really good video and some follow up videos actually on the topics that we discussed, and like I'm good at that, and it's good to be able to like study these arguments and be able to you know uh, to kind of explain the basics of the science to people. So not only do they understand why it's wrong, but they also learn something about science.
Well, yeah,
Like I've said,
you're an effective science communicator, which is important. But a lot of times, before you can build a thing, you have to destroy preconceived notions. And if you can't get past the preconceived notions because someone believes a thing because they use faith, which is functionally an errant method of truth discovery, I believe thing is true, therefore it is true. It's leads to a lot of issues in society. But some of the building up is going to require some tearing down to get through the veil, right?
that's true. That's true. Yeah. Um. Amelia Butix is
Yeah,
asking, what's your opinion on consilience between hard sciences and soft/humanities? Is it possible? Yeah, I'm kind of black-pilled on a lot of the social sciences, and specifically the macro-scale social sciences, ones that discuss kind of large-scale societal dynamics, which I know is ironic because I just endorsed a book that talks about that, Eric Hoffer's The True Believer. Um, but I think, if we just break down kind of the like I mentioned before, I have an upcoming video that's going to be talking about publication bias specifically and how this can fuck with people's meta-analyses and end up distorting their results. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. There are so many pieces of the puzzle. There's p-hacking, there's harking, which is hypothesizing after results are known. There are citation cartels, and a whole host of perverse incentive structures associated with building your career as an academic. That those incentives are present to some degree as well in like physics, but with physics, I feel there's more skin in the game. Like planes aren't blowing up in the sky, bridges aren't collapsing, particle accelerators aren't sucking cities into a black hole. Um, it's whereas in certain other types of fields, like the consequences for getting it wrong are at the worst bad legislation, and then because of the way our system is set up, you can never really hold the failures of any piece of legislation accountable to that piece of legislation. Like there's always going to be some confounder that you can point to, something that you can blame for the failure of the legislation, or you can like move the goalposts and say, oh, actually the piece of legislation wasn't meant to accomplish such and so, it was meant to accomplish something else. Um, so like you could say something like the reason this legislation didn't pan out the way we wanted it to is because Congress was being obstructed by the other party, and they forced our party to compromise and change legislation in a manner that made it not work anymore. So they deliberately derailed it for political purposes, right? You can say something like that. You can say something like the institutions have been mismanaged in a way that prevented the policy, which was good, from being executed effectively. So what we actually need is a different administration in order to correctly execute the piece of legislation. Um, you can point to a zillion and one thing. The previous president, they left the last guy, he left the current guy with a bad economy, and that's why the current guy can't get the stuff done, and that's why the piece of legislation can't effectively function in an environment like the one that we're currently in. Right? There's always something to point to that will make it so that even when the reason legislation fails is because the underlying social theory that it's based upon is wrong. You're not going to be able to definitively point to that because there are a zillion confounders which make it impossible to hold social theorists accountable.
as a sidebar to that, the state of California has probably the most egregious homelessness issue.
Yeah,
And in places like Los Angeles, they're paying people over $200,000 a year to solve the problem. But the problem is, if they solve the problem, then they don't have a job anymore, right? So
yeah,
it's like the incentives are also broken, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it seems like that's kind of an issue where we're like, we're going to pay you to solve a problem, except once you've solved the problem, you're out of a job, right?
yeah.
There's all these things that come into it that make it very, very difficult to navigate those waters.
Yeah, it's the self-licking ice cream cone problem. But to answer the second part of Melia's question, I think in principle it is possible for there to be consilience between the the hard sciences and the quote unquote soft sciences, right? Um, I think consilience would be possible in principle, but what would have to happen is basically a dramatic overhaul of especially macro scale social theories that would require them to be grounded in biological theories, and there would have to be kind of organs of quality control installed into the institutions in a way that peer review isn't really doing right now. And this would basically function as a kind of data literacy check. It would ensure that um, that studies are pre-registered, for example. So this will fight against things like publication bias and p-hacking and harking and a whole host of other things, right? You could have that, and you can just hold you can enforce these stricter standards, and you can make it so that our understanding of society is rooted in a biological appraisal of reality, right? I think that would be a very important first step, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon, especially not in the universities.
Right. Well, the universities are completely corrupted. There
Mm.
is this insane drive to say a thing that I believe is true, and then you have to validate whatever it is I say. I think it was Michael Knowles was having a conversation. Not a huge fan of the dude, but what he did say to a far left individual was, "I identify as being right in this conversation, and you have to validate that." Right,
Mhm.
and that kind of thought process, where everything I say is true and anything you say that I don't like hurts my feelings, doesn't get us anywhere, because you can't have a conversation with any kind of consilience at that, because someone is right which makes you wrong, and
Yeah,
that's very difficult to overcome.
yeah. Claire Craig, great YouTube channel, by the way. Highly recommend you subscribe to her. She's pointing out in the comments whatever I said earlier about legislation. She says that's similar to Thomas Sowell's Intellectuals in Society, which is a very thick and outstanding
Ooh,
book that I also recommend.
yes.
She says where the anointed class can make legislative decisions based on faulty, misread metrics, or due to the fact that they can't consider all the variables and rarely face accountability for this. 100% yes.
The Snowy Banana has a question. Not sure if you have any interest or knowledge on language slash philosophy of language and whatnot, but I got into a
Disagreement with a guy on whether or not non-existence exists. Any thoughts on that? Um, I tweeted some time ago the question: Is a whole a thing, or is it its own thing? And Gary Edwards responded with something very clever. Um, I think a whole is the absence of a thing and not its own thing. So I don't know if that answers you. I don't have a good justification for that. That's just my intuition. It's one of those
Hi,
fun little nut.
Claire. I subscribe to Claire Craig.
Good job.
Bam.
But yeah, holes are not their own thing. They're the absence of things. Uh, I'll defend this line in verse. Anyway,
So I'm not
oh, go
seeing
ahead.
any new book by Aaron Ra. I've been looking around. It's just got the Foundational Falsehoods of Creation and the Ape book.
Oh, did he finally finish writing that one?
Well, I'm seeing that you can buy it. It doesn't mean it's necessarily done, except that it's in both English and Spanish. Let me
Hmm.
see. We Are All Apes. It says it's $14.69. 2022 pub date.
I
Hmm.
might buy it. I was on stream with Aaron once, and Shannon Q as well. And I was like, Shannon and I were like talking about a whole bunch of books we were reading. I think we were like mentioning Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman,
Hmm.
which is a really good one that I definitely recommend, even if some of it is was subsequently found to be based on bad literature and did fall prey to the reproducibility crisis. It's still a really good book. And we were just talking about like a whole bunch. And at one point, R.N. Ross says something like, "King Crocoduck, are there any books you haven't read?" And I answered, "I haven't read your book." Yeah, Aaron got a good laugh out of that. He's a good guy.
I that dude is pretty incredible, actually.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I
his
watched
his
from the. Go ahead.
his memory is really good. Like about all of the little. I'm always impressed with like people who are well versed in paleontology and stuff like that, because you have to know all of these different categories and subcategories and subcategories. Like you have to be super autistic in a good way, to be able to like know all of these details and recall them from memory and be able to say, oh yeah, this organism is like a therapsid because it has such and such features, which distinguishes it from these other category that I can't be arsed to remember because I'm not a fucking
It's like an Excel
paleontologist.
spreadsheet with all the functions put in it, stuck in his head. Ninth Ring has a
Mm-hmm.
question. He says, "G'day, Casey. I'm curious how you think AI will impact the development of science. In a way, acting like peer review, helping to filter junk science and manipulated data."
Um, let's see. I know that there are tools that you can use and that are sometimes used by reviewers. They should be used universally, I think, which allow reviewers to determine whether the data being reported or like the statistics being reported are possible given the data that was collected. Like there are ways of determining whether like someone's reported mean, um, given like the sample size or whatever. I don't remember the details. Whether that's even like mathematically possible. And there have been like papers that were retracted because of this failure. I think that was also part of the reproducibility crisis. And by the way, hello, Dilip VR, who just joined us. How are you doing today?
Good, good. How are you guys?
Doing great.
Am
Doing
I too loud?
amazing.
Awesome.
I have to go to the range. I'm going to hand it off to Dilip. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful day. It was a pleasure, Casey. Send me a message later. I need to holler at you about a couple things. Be well.
Sounds good. Have a good one. Enjoy your shooting.
Yeah. Take care.
Yeah,
Alpha.
Ruger 5.7 by 28 for the win. I'm out.
Whatever that is. I'm a Californian. He's a Texan. So, yeah.
Ruger sounds German. I don't know.
Let's see. Merrick Breeden is asking me a physics math question. Have you ever come across geometric algebra? Probably not in whatever sense you're thinking. Like, are you talking about like topology? Because I have done some topology and some differential geometry, but nothing that was ever specifically called geometric algebra. On the note, what is your opinion on the Zitterbewegung? This also sounds German. Interpretation of quantum mechanics. I don't know what Zitterbewegung is. This might like be a reference to some troll stuff. Do you know
Well,
Dilip?
Zwitterbeidung sounds like something that's vibrating. I have heard of it before. I'm going to try and refresh my memory.
Fast jittery motion. Yeah, I've not heard of that interpretation. I think I'm mostly like committed at this point to the Bayesian interpretation of quantum mechanics. But let's hear about Zitterbewegung from Delete VR once he looks it up. I'm gonna keep on like running the stream. We'll get back to you, Merrick. I'll tell you kind of my provisional thoughts based on whatever Delete tells me. Let's see. It's a real physical model for spin. Not sure if it's true, but very interesting. Yeah, spin. Spin's a funny thing because intuitively, like when you first hear about spin, what you want to, the thing you want to do, and that's wrong, is you want to think of like electrons as like little planets orbiting the sun. There's the angular momentum component of their motion, which is the actual like orbital motion, and then there's the spin, which is like the Earth spinning around its axis. Right? That's like the intuitive baby quantum mechanics picture that you kind of get when you first hear about spin. And it's totally wrong because electrons are not like little planets. Depending on how you conceptualize them, they're either infinitely small points that obey a Dirac delta function in terms of their distribution, or if we're thinking about like the wave mechanics picture, then there's a probability density associated with like their position, and that gets localized after an experiment. And yeah, there's no such thing as like an infinitely small point that spins about its axis. That's not a thing. Spin is not that. But apparently, spin is just a number, basically. At least that's how I ultimately came to think of it. It's just a number that characterizes um, the 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 properties of some particle. And I don't remember if experimentally this pans out in terms of like the magnetic moment that it's going to have. Um, it's been a while since I've looked at anything related to spin. Well, that's not true. Magnetic resonance imaging relies on spin, but at that level, I haven't looked at stuff for a long time. I just know that there are experimental ways of distinguishing between spin up and spin down, and it has nothing to do with the intuitive picture of like the Earth spinning about its axis. Spin is just one of those like weird things in quantum mechanics that doesn't appear to have a classical mechanical analog. But yeah, I'd be interested in hearing about this physical model for spin. I'd be curious to go ahead,
Well,
Dilip.
it may not be. I still don't know how this relates to spin exactly, but there appears to be a correction to the ground state energy level of any. I'm going to guess any fermion, and this is sort of explained. Explain. I don't know if it's explained or explained away, but as a QED correction for some higher order correction where there's an interaction between the positive and negative energy levels. So if you had just the electron in free space in quantum mechanics, you would have some kind of a free particle Hamiltonian, but in QED you would probably have some probability of forming higher order pairs like electron positron annihilation, and I think that adds a correction to the ground state energy, which may not show up in higher energy states. So this was probably known a lot earlier than QED, and maybe one of the earlier explanations was that it was somehow violently oscillating. So hence the term Switzer by Dung.
Interesting. You said this only applies to fermions?
I think this was mostly applied to the electron in the early in the hydrogen atom in the early analysis. So I'm going to stick to fermions and QED.
Okay. Yeah. For those who don't know, fermion is basically any particle whose spin value is like 1/2 or 3/2 or 5/2 or what. Whereas bosons have integer spin values 0, 1, 2, blah blah blah. But yeah, these days I don't really fuck around with quantum mechanics as much as I used to. Mostly like the interaction between particles and matter within like a physics of ionizing radiation context.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of trying to add mechanical epicycles in an age before proper field theories is my guess.
Yeah. I dabbled a little bit with quantum field theory towards the end of my undergrad, but ultimately I started the theoretical physics I got into was of the biophysics variety in grad school. And then later I was like, you know what, I actually don't want to be a theorist anymore. I want to do like more experimental work, and that ultimately got me into biomedical physics, which is where I am right now.
I feel you. Yeah, that it kind of annoyed me too when I first attempted to enter particle physics. I guess there was too much baggage, historical baggage, should I say that? So it was very difficult to approach the subject as if for the first time. And there was a big steep learning curve where you had to take a lot on faith, and it was weighty.
Yeah, for sure. Dirty Atreyu is asking, is it true that all current interpretations of quantum mechanics are by definition unfalsifiable? Not necessarily. What they are right now is practically indistinguishable from one another. Practically in the sense that experimentally, you can interpret the outcome of an experiment using any one of these frameworks, and they wouldn't necessarily have any objective advantage over all of their rivals. And I think this situation is not necessarily permanent. Like if you take, for example, hidden variables interpretations, like Bohmian mechanics, at the end of the day, if you can use Bohmian mechanics, if someday they can identify what the hidden variables are and how you can identify and say, okay, these are the hidden variables, the things that will actually allow us to determine the state of every the experiment. We're gonna know beforehand how exactly the probability distribution is going to be localized, right? Once we perform, take the double slit experiment, we're going to be able to predict beforehand using the hidden variables whether the electron is going to pass through this slit or through that slit, right? And what should we call it? Or we're gonna, or if you do like the Stern-Gerlach experiment, we're gonna know beforehand what the, well, actually maybe that's not such a great example, but like just generally speaking, for a quantum mechanical experiment where you could have you could have an entire distribution of possible states that the system could take on, right? If you can predict beforehand which specific state it's going to be using the hidden variables theory, and you're not able to do that with the other interpretations, then that interpretation is going to be favored over all of the other ones, right? That's just how it is. It'll have superior predictive capabilities. You'll be able to predict not just probability distributions anymore, but the actual outcomes of experiments, right? So in principle, like if they did, ever identify what the hidden variables are, then yeah, there are the possible avenues. But as at this moment in time, none of them appear to have any advantage over any of the others. As I like to say, the correct interpretation of quantum mechanics at this moment in time is the one that best helps you understand and think about what's going on. The Villain Zero is asking, asked today OpenSI about some scientific topic. After its answer, I asked about the papers from which the information were taken. Chatbot responded that he cannot give those information. What a shame. Writing papers could be so much easier with AI help and finding right publication. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't given much thought to the relationship between AI and the actual conduction of scientific research. Like I know there have been some like hoax papers that were submitted to test like conferences and journals and stuff to see if they were legit or just being predatory, and they used like AI generated nonsense and got the stuff submitted, and they got it published, and that caused some problems. But like beyond that, I haven't really engaged with the topic.
How recent was this?
That was a few years ago. It was like before the grievance studies affair, I think.
Oh, I see. Huh.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping there was a slow blade approach to hoaxing where you're supposed to convince an entire generation of students to make this a standard way of submitting papers. But you'd have to do it underground so it doesn't get your cover doesn't get blown.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would go about that.
Yeah. It would be funny, wouldn't it, to like recruit like a whole bunch of students to be like, okay, we're gonna launch some stings against some journals. Here's how you go about making a fake paper. Go nuts, and then just see what happens. Just watch the chaos unfold.
Yeah, I mean the previous SoCal hoaxes didn't really affect the fields the way we were expecting it to. So to have an impact at all,
yeah, but maybe that's just a scaling issue. Like, occasionally once every few years you get like, oh look, all these hoaxes. But what if it was like a continuous stream? What if it just never stopped? Right? Journals would be forced to adapt, I think, because they would constantly be getting bad publicity, and the public trust in the journals and their prestige would be consistently deteriorated. But a man can dream.
Yeah, I think there should be a provable way to show that this was indeed AI generated. I think they would get somewhere, like a hash published to a blockchain to be revealed at a later date.
All right, we're coming up on the hour soon, and if we don't get like a new big topic, I guess we'll be able to end it early. But in the interim, if people have like questions or if they have book or movie recommendations, that would be cool. Have you read any good books lately, Delete VR?
Oh, I've been dabbling in economics. Well,
Oh, yeah?
specifically trading. Um, I'm trying to do a deep dive into what happened with the GameStop thing. I haven't seen a proper accounting of it.
Mhm.
So I've been reading Flash Boys and the rebuttal to the Flash Boys, and this little book by Susan Trimble. I think it's called Naked, Greedy, and Short. Something to do with short short selling and naked shorts.
Mhm.
It's been fun.
While we're on the topic, what do you think of the price of Tesla? You believe
Oh,
that shit?
I haven't been looking into it.
Okay.
I just feel like there's too much technology in Tesla.
Yeah. I mean, I look at the price of Tesla shares. I'm like, this. I don't know. I feel like this whole fucking economy is a fraud sometimes. But um, the villain Zero says, by the way, soon I will be a bachelor in applied physics, mostly due to your videos debunking creationists. Thanks for inspiration, KC. Thank you, the villain Zero, for saying that. This is my favorite kind of comment to receive. It always makes my day to see that like I had an impact on people's careers, a positive impact. So thanks. LRB is asking, what do you think of Anti-Citizen X's transition to philosophy engineer? And he says he wasn't the biggest fan of. I like Anti-Citizen X. I think he's got good videos, even like when he says controversial stuff. So sometimes I think like it's well grounded and well thought out, and like at the very least, it should provide people with food for thought. Um, his latest video, 2 + 2 = God, RE God and mathematics, reasonable. Yeah, I thought that was a decent video. I didn't have a problem with it. Yeah, check out Anti-Citizen X if you haven't. He's um, especially his like video series on like the philosophy of apologetics. It's not just going to teach you how to like debunk Christian apologetics. It'll like give you kind of a more general insight into what things like logic are and why. Well, you'll see. Check out his videos. There's a lot of good stuff there. All right. Let me see. What were some good books I read recently, aside from the ones that I've mentioned? Let me think. I recently reread Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. That was a really good one. I really enjoyed that. It's a kind. He comes up with this thing called logotherapy, which I think of as a kind of proto cognitive behavioral therapy. It has the C in CBT, though not necessarily the B. And basically, this book is about he was a concentration camp survivor. He like went through multiple death camps and somehow got out of it alive. And the first half of the book is basically just him relaying his experiences, and the second half is about him outlining kind of what logotherapy is and how essentially it's about getting people to find meaning in their suffering, reframing their negative experiences in a fashion that gives meaning to their lives.
Oh, that's fascinating. Did he emigrate or did he stay in Austria?
I think he went to America to teach, but I might be mistaken about that. Starquake by Robert L. Forward. This is a recommendation by Ninth Ring. He says it's about alien life forms that live on the surface of a neutron star. The physics is brilliant but dated. How on earth do you live on the surface of a neutron star? I've gotta learn more about that. That sounds kind of nuts. Like a spoonful of the stuff weighs like a bazillion tons. That's what I remember. The Villain Zero says, I remember you said about face reveal when you will acquire your PhD. So how's the progress with PhD? I already finished with school like a year and a half ago. And the face reveal, wow, I think I'm saving that more for like the 100,000 subscriber count if I ever reach that. That requires me to upload more consistently, but uploading more consistently requires me to have the time and inclination to do that, and like um I don't know. YouTube is tougher than it used to be, both because of how YouTube is now and of how my life is now. Cyber Optic, thank you for the $10 super chat. He says, "I'm a fan of the Tesla tech, but Musk's politics." Maybe he meant, but not Musk's politics. Or, "I'm a fan not only of the Tesla tech, but also Musk's politics." Feel free to give me another $10 super chat to clarify what you mean.
Yeah, I don't. Okay, again, I have no comments about the politics, but I do feel like the technology is a bit too close source, and I'm kind of wary of cars that are so autonomous that they can, basically lock their doors and drive you to the police station.
Yeah, not the best getaway vehicle.
Yeah.
Let's see. Dylan Burns released a new vid on Starlink's role in Ukraine. Is Dylan Burns in my Discord server? I feel like the name is familiar. I'll have to see what this is about. I'll check it out. The YouTuber with the unpronounceable name is asking, "Have you read the Foundation series by Asimov? There's themes of social versus physical sciences and mathematical theories of human behavior on large scales." Okay, that sounds intriguing. I'll look into that.
Is this about the psychohistory? It's been a while since I read the Foundations, but I think the gist of it was somebody realized he could pretty much determine where the species was headed, and he discovered that there's going to be a dark age, and he decided that there should be a foundation, as it were, of knowledge preservers that are meant to capture all the knowledge until the dark age passes. And
Interesting.
yeah, he explores that, and he explores. I think in one of the interviews, Asimov was asked about the idea, and he said, "Well, Chaos Theory came around and ruined everything."
Oh, yeah, I can see how it might do that. The Snowy Banana is asking, for the purposes of Patreon, are live streams counted as creations? And then if no, how often are creations churned out? And then again, has anyone done $1,000 Patreon yet? Okay, so live streams are not charged. I do not charge my patrons for live streams. How often are creations churned out? Not terribly frequently, but if you want to like donate money for whenever I do crank them out, like they do take time, and I do like purchase software to make them. So I'd certainly appreciate donations. The way my Patreon works is you don't pay on a per monthly basis. You pay on like a per video basis. So if you wanted to save, pledge $20, okay, King Crocodile, next time you put out like an actual proper video, I want to, I want to contribute $20 toward that effort, right? And then like 6 months pass and I don't upload anything, and then I do upload, and like, okay, now you've contributed $20, and now your name's like in the credits. Like that's the kind of thing you can expect if you join my Patreon. I hope to upload proper videos more frequently than every 6 months. But, like I said, it's not as easy as it used to be. And no one has done $1,000 Patreon yet. I have kind of a tongue-in-cheek reward for that one. You'll have to follow the link for the I forgot to put the link. Look, you see what a noob I am at this? I'm not even good at shilling myself. I forgot to put the link to my Patreon in the description box. This is what I get for being off YouTube for so long.
Looks like Marek Breeden has a book recommendation. It's Geometric Algebra for Physicists by Duran and Lansby.
I'll consider it. It's been a while since I've learned a new math. The most recent new math I learned was back in like 2017. Back when I was doing computational biophysics, I learned graph theory. That was really interesting.
It takes me back to when Chomsky was calling out the theory in the humanities back in the 90s, and he would always recommend that they take some math course.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that would have helped?
I think it would have gone some way to helping them understand the difference between knowing something and pretending to know something.
Yeah, assuming that you can get them all to take it in good faith.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, the people in the humanities are not stupid, and they're not lazy, and they're not like, they're not weak-willed or anything like that. It's just I think that a lot of them have a misapprehension as to what exactly it is the humanities accomplish relative to the sciences. And if you kind of want the elevator pitch version of it, I see it as the sciences give us the means to live better, more productive lives. Um, they kind of allow us to outsource a lot of the drudgery of living to technology. Um, Whereas the humanities provide us the justification for living. Um, so yeah, and I feel like a lot of people in the humanities, they um, they kind of seem to take society as an engineering project, but without an understanding of any of the principles of engineering, or it has to be said society. But yeah, that's kind of the long and short of my attitude toward that question.
You'll have to dive into something like styles of learning or different types of perception in people at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Villain Zero
And
asks, ever thought about collaboration with Thunderfoot? I remember you two get well with each other. It's funny. Thunderfoot and I have actually almost never interacted. Um, I don't have any negative feelings toward him. To my knowledge, he doesn't have any towards me. Um, I don't know. I don't think he really pays attention to my neck of the woods anymore. So I doubt a collaboration between us will ever happen. He was one of my early inspirations, back in this YouTube channel. Before I found my own voice, I would like kind of mimic his style a little bit, especially for the Eric Hovind video series. That was a long time ago. John Doe is asking Mr. Crocoduck, excuse me, John Doe, that's King Crocoduck to you. Thanks very much. Mr. Crocoduck, do you intend to turn your naturalist nuke videos into articles or books? Articles, perhaps. Books, maybe. If I am going to be releasing a book, it's going to be a novel that I've been like thinking about for 10 years. That's a whole other discussion. The Snowy Banana. Oh, there's a funny question. Knowing something versus pretending to know something. How do you know when you know something? That's a very good question. I think that's the question that epistemology tries to answer, and kind of the answer I would give would be cast in terms of the big four operational criteria. This word knowing, we just operationalize it. We define it practically in terms of this set of criteria that is satisfied. And once that criteria is satisfied, then we say, okay, the thing that we say is knowing, that has been achieved. Right. LRB says, do you think there are any particular college departments that do active harm to the understanding of the world or science? Yes. Science and technology studies. The people who contain the Sandra Hardings and the Steve Fullers of the world. These are people, these are departments that will, if you ask the question, why do scientists believe X? STS, the Science and Technology Studies people, their answer is not going to be cast in terms of the evidence. They're not going to say scientists believe X because they there's this set of evidence and they apply such and such inferences to explain such and such thing. Right? That's not the kind of answer they're going to give. The answer that they're going to give is going to be cast in terms of the social situations of the scientists. Their answer is going to be scientists believe X because scientists are socialized under such and such circumstances, and they belong to such and such demographics, which inclines them because of such and such privileges or oppressions to such and such interpretations. Right? That's their understanding of why science is the way that it is, and it's so out the ass. It's just so. Watch my Science War series. That'll clear up why I don't have respect for this kind of endeavor, at least in the way that it's being applied. There are things that STS could be doing, maybe there are certain corners of STS that are doing it that look at the sort of things that I'm concerned about. So things like the replication crisis, things like publication bias and p-hacking and harking, all these other things, and the kind of incentives in the institutional component of science, things that might incline scientists to engage in bad science, but this rests upon a view of science where we're able to distinguish good science from bad science in methodological terms, whereas STS distinguishes good science from bad science in normative terms, or I should say, in politically ideological terms. A science is good or bad if it supports or negates such and such political ideology.
Yeah, about I think you mentioned Popper before and his paradigm shift. So the paradigm shift idea is.
I think you mean Thomas Kuhn.
Oh, Kuhn, that's right.
Yeah.
I guess it didn't come up. So that's a purely sociological and incomplete, right? Because it wouldn't rule out a kind of back and forth between a fixed number of positions or a random walk in a graph.
Yeah, and with Kuhn, like how radically you interpret Kuhn really comes down to how you interpret the 10th chapter of his book, Structure of Scientific Revolutions. If you take kind of the radical interpretation that someone like Paul Feyerabend took, which is that whatever it is scientists believe, this is fundamentally a function of social dynamics. Then you're gonna take the wrong path in understanding how science develops. Whereas if you take a more modest approach, like the one that Kuhn later clarified when he was like getting mad at people like Feyerabend for taking the things that he said and running off with it, the picture that forms is more subtle than that. It's like, okay, you have these different aspects of the scientific enterprise that are not necessarily methodological in character. These are going to be things like the discourses in the institutions, to use my kind of three-cylinder defense conceptualization of this. And those things can negatively impact the trajectory of science. But at the end of the day, science isn't anarchistic. It doesn't move in whatever direction the social practitioners happen to be in. There is such a thing as scientific progress, and it's not just constrained by whatever happened to be our social mores. But the dominant interpretation of Kuhn is the one that STS crapped out.
So Isaac asks, what do you think is the most interesting open problem in math or physics, e.g., the Millennium Prize problems or any others that might come to mind?
Yeah, why does the universe try to minimize action?
Sounds like the ultimate why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Basically, why is the universe lazy? Mr. Boyardo is asking about the Science War. Is the series finished, or are there going to be new videos? Yeah, there will be new videos, but they're going to be less about the epistemology generally and more about specific skirmishes in the Science War. So I've been promising for a long time this video about macho sperm and bashful eggs, and that'll come out, but I don't really have a timeline for when exactly. Let's see. Yeah, there are things still worth talking about concerning the Science Wars. LRB is asking, do you think there are any departments becoming more like STS? I mean, yeah, to the extent that departments generally, if a history department relies on STS sources, if they rely on like Bruno Latour or Andrew Pickering or these other authors, these other influential figures who kind of characterized science in the way that I was castigating earlier. These will be people who like take a very Foucauldian view of history. People who, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I think to the extent a department becomes ideologically captured, which is more and more of them, I think. They're going to think more and more along these kinds of lines, which is not great. MNDB, thank you very much for the €20. That is a euro sign, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, €20 donation. He says, or they say, thanks for inspiration to pursue a physics degree. Thank you for your comment and your super chat. Like I said, I love this kind of comment, and that definitely helps make my day.
Snowy Banana asks opinion on Platonic forms.
Not real.
That was simple.
Yeah.
The ninth ring. What would it take? What would it look like if it wasn't lazy?
What would it look like if it wasn't lazy? Um, when you drop a rock, it wouldn't fall straight to the ground. It would like zigzag all over the place and do somersaults and loops and shit.
But it would there would still be conservation laws, maybe at least energy, or
Do you think there would? Would there be conservation laws if action was not minimum? I feel like there's like a fundamental symmetry there, isn't there? I'm thinking
yeah,
of like Emmy Nuthers. Uh, I'm thinking along those lines. That you know what I'm talking about.
yeah. It's a little bit harder to think about. I'm more of a differential guy than an integral equation guy, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Dragon Rider 75 says, does sociology have some legitimacy? When I was in college, I had to choose between taking a sociology course and a psychology course, and I took psychology because I felt it was more legitimate. Yeah, I think you made the right decision. Does sociology have some legitimacy? I mean, in terms of epiphenomena, like when they just look at the raw data and say, okay, what does the world look like, right? If they just employ descriptive statistics, like at that level, yeah. But then when they start, attempting to explain things in terms of causal explanations, or when they apply interpretive frameworks, I become much more skeptical of those endeavors.
John Doe asks, Your Majesty, do you think that it is possible to defeat postmodernism in academia within our lifetime, or are we doomed to endure woke bullshit until the end of our days?
Okay. I mean, I don't necessarily equate postmodernism with woke. Postmodernism is a tool that is abused by the woke, but and it might not necessarily be a bad idea to retain it, at least to some degree, within certain contexts, as long as we're like clear about the limitations of what postmodernity is capable of achieving. But my attitude towards the academy at this point is we need to start thinking about developing alternative parallel institutions. Like, um, what was the name of that kind of academy that Aristotle came up with? Was it the Niceum or something like that? Let me look this up real quick. Hold on. Niceum, Aristotle. The Lyceum. There we go. The Lyceum. So, the academy, as it currently stands, has political views that are informing the production of knowledge in a way that I think parallels Plato. Plato had certain political views as a consequence of his experiences and the death of Socrates. And subsequently, he went on a boat for a few years and he joined a weird triangle cult. And then he came back and he was like, okay, I understand how the world works now. Basically, democracy sucks. People suck. We need a totalitarian system where the people like me get to take charge of everything, and we get to kind of call the shots. And he develops an entire system to justify this political this politic. And the story of the academy, as it currently stands, is the story of people who, in some capacity, share this type of view and this type of ambition. And in contrast to this, we have Aristotle, who was like, no, fuck this. We need a more grounded, more naturalistic approach to how to figure out how the world works. I'm going to build my alternative to the academy, which I call the Lyceum, or which Aristotle called the Lyceum, and which ultimately, if we ever develop a parallel institution to the academy, I think it'll be good to call that the Lyceum as well, right? Because the academy, that's Plato's thing, and the Lyceum, that's Aristotle's rival thing. Um, and it I think if we did something like that, we could, in principle, inoculate ourselves from the kinds of mistakes that led to the current state of the academy.
That's interesting because there is another Lyceum. I associate that word with a period in maybe 1850s to 1880s America, where there was a really strong traveling lecturer circuit. And I think that included figures such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and Mark Twain.
Interesting.
And yeah, quite a few people were actually making a living. Not quite. Maybe Emerson was making a living off it, but many people were contributing to it. And I don't think there's a proper accounting for why that collapsed or why that died out.
Yeah. I mean, as it currently stands, the lecture circuit is dominated by creatures like Ben Shapiro or Kim Davis or, people who kind of get their 15 minutes and then jump on the bandwagon for like outrage culture, but for people who get outraged like in the counterculture. And, their principal function, I feel, is more to deliver dopamine hits than to enlighten us on kind of how the world works. But what you're describing with like Mark Twain and Emerson, it's like, okay, I want to look into this now. I want to see want to see what this kind of proto parallel institution might potentially look like. The Snowy Banana says, but if you think Platonic forms are not real, what's your opinion on mathematics as something separate from the physical realm? My view is that mathematics is the property of minds. We made it up. Math is just the application of an internally consistent set of rules. And the reason why it's so good at describing reality is it just comes down to the precision of the language. Like with ordinary language, like with English, we can easily fall prey to things like equivocation and goalpost shifting because there's an inherent ambiguity in the choice of words we use. Whereas in mathematics, a lot of that ambiguity disappears. So when I say I throw the rock over there versus this is the equation for the trajectory of the rock, right? One of these is going to be a lot more precise than the other. And the degree to which something is good at describing the world, we characterize that in terms of precision and accuracy. So, of course, the more precise language is going to appear to be superior to the natural language. But I don't believe that that's because math is woven into the fabric of space and time or is somehow transcendent. I think it just has to do with the fact that the signifiers are infinitely more precise. Hey Joe says, though woke culture is worrying at times, I feel like we often miss the mark and fail to see a much more dangerous enemy, which is the rise of fascism all over the world. I would love to hear some elaboration on this. Are you thinking of like Vladimir Putin or something like that? And I would be open to having like a conversation and learning more about your thoughts on that. William Barnes asks, if there were no conservation laws, what stops the universe, I guess, from instantly catching on infinite fire everywhere all at once? I'm not sure that that I conceptualize conservation laws in that way. I think of conservation laws as just means by which certain symmetries are preserved, as opposed to like, how order, quote unquote, is preserved.
Maybe you make it more concrete. Like if your equations look the same after time translation, then you probably have energy conservation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
LRB asks, best video game soundtrack?
Ooh, this is a tough one. GTA 5 has some bangers.
I think the answer should depend on your mood, right? You have to make different suggestions for different moods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like to listen to Ed Harrison's cyberpunk soundtrack for Neo Tokyo when I'm trying to work. That does it for me.
Okay. Yeah, I used some Hitman soundtracks in some of my videos. Let's see, Silent Hill 2 has some really good ambience. I love like ambient, early 2005 types of stuff.
I second Silent Hill 2.
Our Father in the Green. Yeah, and there are a lot of reactionaries using fear of wokeism to feed a fascistic narrative. Yeah, but the contrapositive holds true as well. There are a lot of woke people who are using fear of reactionaries to feed their own narrative, which, depending on your interpretation, could be characterized as fascistic in the broad sense, or we'll just say totalitarian. I'll say totalitarian to encapsulate both fascism specifically and other totalitarian ideologies. And then he's recommending conversing with President Sunday on a matter which might be interesting. Yeah. Whenever he's down to chat, I'm also down to chat. Amelia Bituk says, but you got to take Plato with a grain of salt since he writes in character of Socrates, and also you got to see and understand Plato's humor. It is a bit of distortion of Plato's writings done throughout history. I mean, I never saw Plato as being a particularly humorous individual, but writing in the character of Socrates, like I believe that the Socrates whose words I read in the trial and death of Socrates, I'm prepared to believe that that was the real Socrates, that this is Socrates as he was actually represented, because this is a guy who, given the choice to escape and to defy the will of democracy, he decides, no, the virtuous thing is to stand and accept what democracy has to say, which was unjust, but it was what he believed, and he died for it. Right. I don't believe that this same Socrates who died for democracy is also the Socrates who Plato talks about who Plato characterizes in the Republic as creating this false equivalence between doctors who are best suited, or maybe not doctors, I think it was like ship captains who are best suited to steering and charting a ship's course, and philosophers who are best suited to determining the course of society. Right, that kind of anti-democratic argument, I don't believe that the Socrates who died for democracy is capable of this kind of sophistry. I think that was an invention of Plato, who, after years of exile, was bitter with democracy for killing his teacher.
So William Barnes makes a comment, mathematics is a constructed language invented by humans.
Yeah.
Pretty much conforms.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
people raise their eyebrows when I like say, I'm more sympathetic to math being a social construct than science, because intuitively people think like, what? I thought they have this like hierarchy in their minds where math is like the most objective and precise thing, and science is like a step under that. And it's like they're not considering it methodologically when they think of it in that way. So that's why they think it's counterintuitive. But if you understand it as I do, as science kind of just being continuous with the evolution of our cognition, and mathematics as being particularly well suited to the expansion of science into regimes where it otherwise would have been less fruitful, then I think it makes perfect sense. Like you can use socially constructed things like institutions and discourses, including mathematical discourses, to amplify scientific practice. Right? It's better to have grant foundations and like tax credits for certain types of scientific research. Right? It's better to have these kinds of social things. It's better for science to advance than for us to not have these social things. But that doesn't mean that science is inherently social. Science is just capable of being either amplified or held back by social incentives.
So the villain Zero is bringing up some culture war stuff. He asks, or they ask, what do you think about red pill / black pill philosophy, and are those just incel agenda, or there is some truth? ?
I think of these things as basically being folk psychology and folk politics, folk theories of psychology and folk theories of sociology. Methodologically, I would say they differ from the interpretivist characterizations of society only in terms of institutional support. So, like the difference between, I don't know, somebody who's like who gives like a MGTOW or incel perspective of the world, and someone who gives a radical feminist perspective of the world, and the kind of interpretive frameworks that they apply. I feel like the only difference between those two is one of these gets institutional legitimation and the other one doesn't. So yeah, the way I look at like both of these things, I look at them as being indicative of the circumstances of the people who come up with them and who participate in them. I think when you look at like a radical feminist or on the other end, the MGTOW theory of how society works. We learn more about the people who believe in this stuff than we do about the actual state of society. Although, there's a recursive element to it. If we understand these people as they operate in this historical moment, maybe they can help us understand society as it's currently constituted, but not in terms of the stories that they tell, only in terms of what we can surmise about the people telling these stories, if that distinction makes sense.
Yeah, I think the healthiest route is to recognize how much missing information there is, and maybe be wary of how much of our own prejudices we are adding to our theories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Milja Bichux asks, or as intersectionalist would ask, was what race is the person that threw the rock?
Yeah,
I don't
This
remember.
this harkens back to what I was saying about like the mathematical language for describing a rock being thrown is really precise, and then the ordinary language version of this is I threw a rock and it went in an arc and there it is. And Amelia, he or she is saying an intersectionalist would ask, what race is the person that threw the rock? Yeah, what race, what gender, blah 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 blah. We don't learn anything about the actual trajectory of the rock. We only learn, okay, this is the demographic of the person, and it's somehow indicative, right? We can interpret this as somehow indicative of society being institutionally oppressive and therefore in need of radical reform that puts us, the philosopher kings, in charge.
So Ferenc Dozak, I hope I pronounced that right, asks, late Wittgenstein, one, how accurate you consider his analysis of language games and the problem of definitions and axioms, and two, if you think accurate, what is the best remedy for it?
Okay, so the thing about Wittgenstein's language games is it's one of those things. It's the hammer and nail problem, right? If every problem looks like a nail, then of course you're gonna use a hammer to solve every problem. And I feel like language games, this idea of family resemblance that this rests upon, I'm nervous that it gets used too often as a panacea. Um, even though like there are ambiguities in terms of categories and in terms of how you can make proper distinctions between things and how we can communicate things, I'm not entirely convinced that the concept of family resemblance is particularly well suited um, to describing how the world works, because it requires some measure of intuition, and our intuition is largely just a function of our place in time and history. Not entirely. There's a biological component, but a lot of our intuition does seem to be formed that way. So, I mean, I'm a little bit skeptical of his approach, and I don't have an answer for the best remedy at this time. I think I would probably just default to the pragmatist and the big four characterization of the world that I outline in the Naturalist Nuke.
So Mr. Boyardo apologetically asks what the favorite game is.
Oh man, let's see. I've been playing a lot of Elden Ring this last year. I don't know if I would call it my favorite, but it's definitely a really good one. Um, the 2018 God of War was outstanding, one of my favorite of all time. Didn't really like the sequel all that much though. I felt the story had some problems, especially toward the end. I feel the same way about like Last of Us Part 1 and 2. First one was great. Second one had serious problems in terms of like the way the story was told. Shit, what are some good ones? Spider-Man, the Spider-Man game from Insomniac. That was a banger. I loved that. So let's see. I love the Hitman series, especially the World of Assassination trilogy. I think I'm probably gonna have to go with like the entire Hitman franchise. I think that's my favorite of all time.
Interesting. I would put Thief, the original Thief trilogy, as my favorite from 1998 onwards, I think.
Was that like Sly Cooper, or what do you think?
Oh no, Thief is Dark Project. It's the Looking Glass medieval fantasy game, but stealth.
Mhm.
If you haven't heard of it, you should look into it. It's a little difficult to get playing on modern systems, but
Mhm.
yeah, Thief is the shit.
Yeah.
Don't play the 2014 remake or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of oldies, I was a big Jack and Daxter fan. I think I would got the midnight release of Jack 3 when I was a kid. Great stuff.
Good times.
Hmm.
So the Snowy Banana asks opinion on free will, and before that, what definition of free will would you use?
I think that Anti-Citizen X's video on free will basically covers my entire view of it. Um, I don't have a short answer. I feel like you kind of have to go through the video and just study the argument. It offers a very pragmatic picture of the entire reason we care about free will in the first place, and why the way we generally and intuitively think about it kind of is a bad conceptualization.
So Milia Bituk's
Socrates
points
did
out a
not die
point
for
about that.
democracy, but for law or rule of law. Okay, fair enough. But even so, I mean, it was the rule of law within a democratic context, and I believe that if you believe that the rule of law is legitimate, then this implies that you think that the system from which that rule of law issues is legitimate. Right? Because if you don't believe that the political system that you inhabit is legitimate, then why would you respect the rule of law, especially if your life is on the line? But I think that Melia maybe already agrees with me on that. Just this small point that he didn't die for democracy qua democracy. He died for democracy qua the rule of law.
Narom Diput Sai, or is it Sal?
Looks like it's all.
Yeah, Sal. So he says, or they say, I'm assuming the stuff Socrates said at the trial is probably as remembered, and on top of that, edited to the best case possible, to be the best case possible.
Maybe. I know Karl Popper identifies Democritus as kind of being the best champion of democracy. Ironically, because of his name, not for any more fundamental reason. The Snowy Banana. Do non-physical things exist, or are things that are perceived as non-physical actually just physical and being miscategorized? Example, qualia. Yeah. Short answer is yeah. The kind of view espoused by people like Daniel Dennett and the Churchlands. Excuse me. That's kind of my view of it. I mean, if you take a look at the hard problem of consciousness, for example, I think that this is just a mischaracterization of the situation. I think that they're just making the same mistake as the vitalists did. So, the vitalists, they believed that there was some fundamental, okay, so hard problem of consciousness. How does non-thinking stuff produce thinking stuff, right? How does non-experiential stuff produce the sensation of experience? Supposedly, this is a hard problem. Well, the vitalists also had a quote-unquote hard problem. How is living matter, this stuff that has this special essence of livingness, how is this made up from dead stuff? It isn't. There is a hard and unambiguous distinction that makes it so that non-living stuff cannot ever turn into living stuff. Because and they thought this because at the time they didn't understand what organic chemistry was. Ultimately, the vitalists were shown to be wrong, and I think that this mistake that they were making, that there's some fundamental distinction between living stuff and non-living stuff, is the same kind of mistake that people who gesture towards qualia are making. That there's some fundamental distinction between thinking stuff and non-thinking stuff.
Do you think the AI revolution will bring any of that into the forefront, or is it just?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Looks like the next few comments are an internal discussion. Should we go through?
Let's skip forward to direct questions. I feel like we're coming toward the end. Let's see. Do you think school should be reformed in some way, and if so, how? I don't think reform is possible at this stage. I think that you just need to develop parallel institutions that value that value truth more than whatever the norms happen to be at this particular place and time in history. Lazarus Long, thank you very much for your £8.99 super chat. I really appreciate it. Lazarus writes, the search for ET, given the stabilizing feedback of living systems on their environment, shouldn't any planet radiating a stable surface temp across variations of seasons, day and night be a signal? Maybe. I don't know. I knew a guy once who was involved with SETI. That's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And he had some ideas that vaguely resembled what you're mentioning here. But to be honest, I've never really been that much into like aliens and stuff. I know it's ironic because I originally wanted to be an astrophysicist. I was maybe like the only astrophysics person who didn't care about life on other planets. I was more interested in kind of just the structure and constituency of reality. Nico Bruin says, Socrates defended rule of law on the basis not of legitimacy, but on the basis that the alternative to rule of law was chaos. Okay, but maybe I'll have to think it over. I'll have to think it over. Just intuitively, when I read the Socrates in the trial and the Socrates in the Republic, I feel like I'm reading two completely different characters. But maybe I just need to read them again and think about it more carefully. So I don't know.
John Doe wants to know about your education level.
My education level. So I don't want to give specifics as to the nature of my terminal degree. The reason for that being that there are a very limited number of programs that offer terminal degrees in the field that I'm in, and there are different types of these. So like you can have like a PhD in medical physics. You can have what's called a DMP, which is a doctorate of medical physics. This is a this is a professional degree, kind of like a PsyD. So with this one, you do a residency without necessarily writing a dissertation. You could do like masters, but there's a small number of master's programs that get accredited by this thing called CAMPEP, which is sort of the regulatory body that determines that the institution has satisfied the criteria necessary to actually teach the subject in a way that could be that could subsequently result in board certification. So the information that I've given before, in conjunction with this information, I believe would be sufficient to allow sufficiently motivated individuals to narrow down the possibilities as to what my identity is. And seeing as I've been very protective of my identity for the past decade, this is just a bullet I kind of have to bite. But for all you people know, I could just be a plumber, right? It could just be the case that whatever I've said about physics in the past, I was just pretending, and I was just like reading Wikipedia articles or textbooks or whatever, and like you would have no way of knowing. I think at the end of the day, like, because none of you know who I am, and none of you know like what credentials I have or what experiences I have. Like at the end of the day, you're kind of just taking it as a point of trust that what should we call it? That I know what I'm talking about. I think I think maybe what you could do is like see what people calling themselves physicists. Well, I guess you would have to trust that the people saying that I inspired them to like do physics. You kind of have to trust that they're telling the truth too, and that they're not just like my stock accounts that I'm typing away furiously to get you to to create this illusion that I studied physics. End of the day, just evaluate my beliefs based on their quality and not on whatever you think my credentials are. Right? If I am a plumber, that doesn't change the fact that I know physics.
Yeah, John Doe will still refer to you as Your Majesty. So, yeah. So Javier Sands recommends Martin Goldberg as a YouTube channel, and Sal asks again what your opinion on schools are. I think there was a
Yeah, that they can't be reformed, that you need to create parallel institutions. They're basically beyond saving at this point. I have a very pessimistic view of them. Cordo Maltese says, I listened to you a lot when I was an atheist. I am no longer, but still enjoy your content. Thanks for what you do. Yeah, I haven't done like atheist content since pretty much the beginning of the YouTube channel. And like, even though the word atheist correct, like I don't object to this word when people describe me. I think if I really wanted to be like, anal about it, I could just insist that people call me a naturalistic pantheist. But that requires a whole lot of unpacking, and I don't want to seem like a hipster who's just trying to distinguish himself from other people because I want to substitute esoteric labels for developing my own personality, and that's not the case. So I just people call me atheist. I'm like, I'll take it. Functionally, I'm indistinguishable from one. In terms of my beliefs and my attitude and things like that, there are some major distinctions. But yeah. Anyway, thank you, Corto, and thank you for the super chat. I appreciate having you and everyone else here. I think we're gonna close this whole thing out. We had a pretty good run today. This ended up being a lot more interesting than I expected. This whole thing was off the cuff, but you're all excellent conversationalists. You're all asking great questions and giving great input. So the credit for how good or how bad today's stream was, that goes to you, dearest viewers. So either thank you or fuck you, depending on how this whole thing sounds when I listen to it again later.
All right, it was fun again. Thank you for the link. Yeah, I'm sorry I was late, but
Oh, no worries. I appreciate you coming. I'm just going to go through these last comments just to see kind of what people's. John Smith says, "Dude just Cartesian doubted his own career." I know. I'm so based and French pilled. Red Spain, is quantum theory made easy 3 still coming? Someday. Let's see. Who do you call for alligators in the sewer? King Crock, a plumber. I should change my profile picture to just like have the crocoduck holding a plunger or something. Opinion on human value, morality, and or purpose of life or existence. That ties into my remarks about naturalistic pantheism. I would like to make like a whole video series on Spinoza and some radical empiricist readings of his work, a kind of revisionary Spinozism. My opinion on human value, morality, purpose of life or existence, I think that's kind of the subject of a novel that I'm trying to write and have been trying to write for the past decade. I may have more to say about that in a future stream. Let's see. A lot of thank yous, a lot of goodbyes. The Snowy Banana says, thanks for answering all my questions. I will try my damnedest to get enough disposable money to get that $1,000 Patreon. Okay, just so we're clear, everybody, the Patreon reward for a $1,000 Patreon donation is that I will suck your dick. I don't think this is actually legal, so if you give me $1,000, I'm going to take it, but I ain't giving you the suck. You have to buy me a drink first.
I mean, if you had to cross state lines, it's even more troublesome.
Yeah, no, it's a joke, federal agents. Okay, any federal agents who are listening in and looking at my Patreon rewards, it's a fucking joke. Watch, I'm gonna have like enemies in government who try to like get me on some bullshit. They're like, King Crocoduck solicited himself for prostitution. This is why he's an enemy of the state and needs to be locked up. The Villain Zero, what about your friends who know you and know that you have YouTube account? Ever feared about them doxing you? Well, I mean, like, it's a double-edged sword. They could dox me, but I've got 90,000 plus subscribers and their addresses. So, they have to think very carefully about whether they want to do that. But you know, I don't think any of them really want to do that anyway. All right. Well, that seems to be all the comments. Thank you everybody for joining in. This was actually more fun than I expected, and you know, I appreciate everybody coming in. I appreciate the super chats. I appreciate your comments, and I'll be posting a link to my Patreon after the stream has ended. So have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, everybody, and I'll see you on the next one. Ciao.
See ya.